Hello, fantasy football fans. Welcome to the Week 14 episode of the 9 Route, the fantasy football show that goes deep to help you win. I am Austin Lee, your host, and I'm joined, as always, by Mr. Alex Miglio, fellow Football Guys writer. How you doing tonight, man?
I'm cold and wet. And the entire state of California is underwater right now, apparently.
Hey, we need that water, man. The drought has been killing us, but I'm sorry for your dampness. I'm hoping your picks tonight won't be soggy.
No, I'm not really cold and wet, but I am. My appetite is wet. For this Week 14, first week of the playoffs. Revenge week. Percy Harvin goes and gets revenge on the Vikings, and Kyle Orton he's gonna go beat the Broncos, and Trent Richardson. He's going to average a whole 4 yards per carry this week against the Browns. What do you think?
You had me until Trent Richardson averaging 4 yards per carry. That's where I draw the line. I don't think that's going to happen ever again. No, but I am excited. I'm excited. We're going to cover the news and injuries. We're going to try to get you set for, maybe you're in week 1 of your playoffs this week. Maybe if you're in a 10-team league or smaller, this is your last chance to get into the playoffs. So we're going to try to help you out with that as well. And hey, if you're out of the playoffs, then we're going to give you some daily fantasy sports tips. It's just like 1 week, throw it away. So if you've been knocked out of your playoffs, give daily fantasy sports a try here.
There's like a new DFS or daily fantasy site every week, so you have plenty of opportunity to try it out.
Yeah, exactly. There's like 40 different sites out there, but we're going to focus on DraftKings and FanDuel, the two biggest. Yeah, but there's other great sites out there as well that both Alex and I enjoy playing at, so scope those out if you're out of your playoffs. You can play for free. It's fun. Just give it a try. Salary cap football. It's enjoyable. So let's get started here. We're going to cover each of the games, some more briefly than others, but the first one, yeah, because there's some terrible ones this week.
What do you mean? You don't love the Jets-Vikings matchup? I just previewed it with it's a revenge game.
Yeah. Well, hey, there's a story there. I mean, that's what we got to do here, right? We're going to create a story for each of these. Hopefully, a fantasy story that helps out your fantasy team. Thursday Night Football should be one of the better games. We've got Dallas at Chicago, at least for fantasy production and for the offenses. It seems like the 3 night games are the heaviest point odds favorites, according to Vegas this week. Both the Thursday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, and Monday Night Football. So they are all projected to be over 50 total points by Vegas. So let's start off with this Dallas at Chicago matchup. Dallas fell flat last week against Philly. Do you think they'll recover here against Chicago?
Well, it is December, so it's important to remember that the Dallas Cowboys stink.
You kind of rhymed there for a second. It's December. It's important to remember.
I don't freestyle. I'm sorry. I'm terrible. But it's traditional collapse by the Cowboys. So what do you think is going to happen this week?
Collapse. No, Chicago is worse than Philly. I think
that's true. That is true. And the Cowboys have more than 48 hours to prepare. Like they were on Sunday Night Football the week before they played on Thursday afternoon. It's kind of ridiculous. So that stunk for them, and I think that I honestly think that affected them.
Yeah, and I think they got to win this game so that they can fail in Week 17. That's kind of their MO.
Yeah, they gotta miss the playoffs at the last minute.
Yeah, poor Dallas. Right now, if the playoffs started, they would not be in the big dance. They'd be looking on the outside in. So let's see what happens here. Let's talk about. Hey, Jill, one of our favorite listeners, asked us a question related to this game. She says, "Am I nuts to trust both of my teams to Jay Cutler?" She has Sanchez, who's in that tough matchup against the Seahawks that we'll talk about later. But she has Cutler. Is she crazy to start Cutler, or should she be looking at some waiver wire streaming options at quarterback this week?
Depends on who's available, right? So if I don't know who might be available that would do better than either of those guys, to be honest. I don't love Sanchez. It's a tough matchup at home, but it's got a high over-under, so I expect there to be some scoring in that game. And then Cutler, I mean, he's he's going to either throw 3 touchdowns or throw 3 interceptions and really mess you up. So I actually like Cutler this week though.
Yeah, I think Cutler could be okay here. I'd be tempted to start someone like Ryan Fitzpatrick at Jacksonville. It's not a great matchup. We'll get to it later. It's not a great matchup.
He blew all his scoring last week. Don't fall for Ryan Fitzpatrick. We called him Fitzmagic, but I don't think he's gonna do anything this week.
Yeah, or maybe I might even take a chance on Kyle Orton at Denver.
See, now that one makes sense because that's a revenge game. I'm telling you, all the revenge games. All right,
it's all about revenge.
In case and nobody could pick up on my sarcasm, I don't really love Orton this week.
Yeah. I think you got to roll with Cutler here. I mean, it's a decent matchup for him here, and he's going to be better rest of season than some of these other guys. So it's close enough that you should probably just stick with him. But yeah, it's a bummer if those are your 2 quarterbacks this week. And you just got to hope that it doesn't make or break your playoff run.
I tell you what, if Andrew Luck is available on the waiver wire, you should definitely pick him up and start him.
Does he start for the Alouettes? I forget. Is Canadian football count?
Yeah, he's a Canadian Football League player, but the Colts picked him up this week, and I think he'll do it right.
Oh, maybe it'll be a good revenge game later in the season or something. So let's talk about Brandon Marshall a little bit. He has been in a bit of a slump lately, and Alshon Jeffrey's kind of been out playing.
Well, I mean, didn't he score a couple touchdowns just 2 weeks ago? I mean, he's kind of up and down this season. That's his biggest problem.
Been up and down. Yeah, he's been inconsistent. I think he's still a top 20 receiver, but I'm not putting him in my top 10, even in a decent matchup here. Another thing to look out for, another theme of the week is kicker changes. Ordinarily we don't talk about kickers, but be on the lookout for Robbie Gould being out. If he's someone you've been leaning on, hopefully you haven't, because Jay Feely is kicking for the Chicago Bears this week. Yeah,
those 5 points are really vital to fantasy lineups, so please be careful. Now watch, Jay Feely's going to score like 20 this week.
Yeah. You totally set this up. The Bears are going to win 18-14. All right, we've got 9 1 p.m. Eastern games on Sunday. The first one we're going to talk about is Baltimore at Miami. Serious playoff implications here. If the playoffs started today, our favorite team, the Miami Dolphins, would be in the playoffs. I'm going to enjoy that.
And the Falcons. And the Falcons.
And my second favorite team, yes, the first place Atlanta Falcons, would also be in the playoffs. Now, I haven't played New Orleans.
First place Atlanta Falcons. I still hold true to my prediction that the Saints are going to win at 7-9 and beat the Seahawks at home.
Hey, it can happen. But my thing is that it's better than the 4-7 first place Atlanta Falcons that we had last week. So it's getting better.
Yeah.
So yes, but let's go back to Baltimore at Miami. Ryan Tannehill had a bit of a rough game against the Jets on Monday Night Football, the 16-13 barn burner. Can we trust Ryan Tannehill in this matchup against Baltimore, who's struggled to stop the pass the past few weeks?
Well, last week was supposed to be a really good matchup for Ryan Tannehill, and that didn't turn out so well. Of course, it was a divisional game. I kind of jokingly said that the Dolphins were supposed to destroy the Jets, so it was going to be something like 17-16. And, of course, it was 16-13. So it was, that's just the way it is with the Dolphins. This week's a good matchup. They're at home. The Ravens' pass defense isn't very good, so I do expect him to have a nice game. Whether or not, maybe he's kind of a guy that you can trust over a guy like Sanchez or Cutler, like we were talking before, it's debatable. I think he's pretty comparable. Maybe the difference is that he can run the ball. Maybe he'll get 40 or 50 yards.
Yeah, I would start Tannehill over either of those guys if he happens to be available. But my hunch is in Jill's league, he's probably not out there. But he's like a high-end QB2, I'd say, this week. And the Dolphins, talking about sort of defenses changing as the season goes on, the Dolphins have not looked that good against the run lately, especially with the Jets sort of like deciding that Geno Smith should not throw the ball, which was probably wise.
They had no reason to throw the ball. They ran for like 200 yards in the first half. There was no reason to throw the ball.
Yeah, they were handing it off to everyone. I fully expected the water boy to sort of like take a double reverse for a touchdown.
Rex Ryan could have scored a touchdown last week.
It was crazy. It was insane. So I think this is a good matchup for Justin Forsett. I think he's looked really good, and I think the Dolphins are no longer a run defense to fear. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I love this matchup for Justin Forsett, and he's been running well and taking advantage of good matchups. I have him in my top 5 for this week. I like him that much.
Yeah, he's a strong play this week. And Torrey Smith is dealing with a knee injury. It sounds like he might play this week, but if he sits, Steve Smith might be an interesting option here, or is the Miami pass defense still something to sort of watch out for?
I think that the pass defense is kind of bend don't but don't break for the most part. So I think that both Torrey Smith and Steve Smith, if he plays, I'm sorry, the other way around. Will be
so many Smiths. It's just hard to.
Smith squared. It will be fine. I think that if the knee injury might limit Torrey's upside, so you might want to stay away. Because he may not score. There's just less. The odds are lower that he'll score, I guess. But I think they're both fine.
Yeah. Let's move on to.
This is funny because the Dolphins have a pretty good defense. The run defense hasn't been good, but I think it's going to be a pretty high scoring game. I think it's going to be a lot of back and forth this Sunday.
Yeah, I could see that. Let's move on to Indy at Cleveland. These are two teams with winning records, playoff aspirations, and the Indy defense got torched by Colt McCoy last week, and it's not going to be Johnny Football to start the game at least. So do you think it's Brian Hoyer time here?
No, don't start Brian Hoyer because he's going to probably get yanked halfway through the game like he was last week. It was the dumb decision. I mean, not a dumb. I'm sorry. It was a stupid decision to not put Manziel in. I mean, I understand the whole reasoning, like, oh, well, Manziel didn't practice as much. He doesn't have as much game experience, blah, blah, blah. And yes, the Browns are technically in contention for a playoff spot, but their schedule is ridiculous. And Hoyer has been awful. He's been the worst quarterback in the league by far over the past few weeks. Pro Football Focus has him rated like at the very bottom over the last 3 weeks by a good margin. He's just awful. So I don't buy Hoyer. The Indy defense is not bad. I know they got torched by Colt McCoy last week, but generally speaking, they have been pretty good this year. So just stay away.
Well, here's the thing. I'm a little more excited about Hoyer than you are, and hear me out. Vontae Davis has a concussion and may not play this week. I think that takes
that changes
down
everything.
Just a notch. It doesn't change everything. It
changes some things.
But it does change some things. Maybe it's better for Josh Gordon's prospects than it is necessarily for Brian Hoyer's outcome. Do you think that this Vontae Davis is something to?
Yeah, I think that's huge. Earlier this season, I thought he was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and it was early, but he's playing really well. He was really keying that Colts pass defense. If he's out, then yeah, I mean, I think that does change things for me. I don't know that I would still trust Hoyer, but Gordon looks mighty fine if Vontae Davis is out.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, and especially now that the Browns' leading receiver from last week, Miles Austin, got sent to IR. Gordon had a bit of a down week last week. I expect him to bounce back in a big way here, especially if Davis is out. Isaiah Crowell is dealing with a hip injury, so keep an eye on that. I don't know that it's crazy fantasy relevance here, but Sean Drone was signed this week, and
go
that's
ahead and start him. Yes, go.
No. I'm not saying start him, but it's generally a bad indicator if they go out and sign somebody that maybe Crowell is headed.
That would be good for Terrence West. We could talk about that a little bit later, but yes.
Yeah, I think Terrence West. That's a little tease for our DFS section a little bit later. Let's move on to Carolina at New Orleans. Now this is. New Orleans scored a ton of points last week. Drew Brees looked like he was getting his mojo back a little bit, but Jimmy Graham had 0 targets. How do you see this playing out this week? What's the real story for New Orleans?
I have absolutely no idea. What the heck is going on in New Orleans? 0 targets. That's just amazing for Jimmy Graham. I lost a game in which I scored 141 points in a standard league because Jimmy Graham scored 0 points. It's ridiculous. But anyway, all personal affronts aside, I think he'll be fine. I think, it's one of those things where everything else was working. I didn't actually watch that game in particular, but in its entirety or anything. But it seemed like because the defense was keying on Graham, that some other stuff was open, and Drew Brees threw 5 touchdowns. So what was the point of targeting Graham if everything else is working?
Yeah, and Kenny Stills seemed to be the biggest beneficiary of that, getting a lot of that action with Graham, getting extra attention from the defense. Now, on the running side of the ball for New Orleans, it sounds like Kyrie Robinson is going to be back this week. I'm not that worried about that, but the Panthers, who were kind of a really terrible rushing defense earlier in the year, have shored things up a little bit in the past 5 weeks. So I think this is a little bit of a, you might think this is a great matchup for Ingram. I think it's a deceivingly negative matchup for him slightly here. But he's looked pretty good the past, he had a good run there a few games ago. So I'm not saying he's a bad play, but just don't think that he's an automatic, like, Carolina is weak on run defense, go throw him out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Ingram is fine. I think he's going to have a lot of volume this week, so he won't necessarily be a bad a bad play. But yeah, the Carolina defense has shored things up a little bit. So granted, if they're playing a pass defense that can torch them, then things might open up for him a little bit.
Yeah, and it sounds like D'Angelo Williams has a finger injury. Maybe that means Jonathan
surprise!
Stewart.
Someone is injured in that Carolina backfield.
Yeah, well, that's why they signed like 4 running backs to a giant contract, right? So
hedging your bets with millions of dollars.
That's the way to do it. That's the way to do it. When I go to the roulette table, I just put down a coin on every number. That way, I got everything covered, and I just feel good because I win every time.
I put half my money on black and half my money on red every time. That's how I play roulette.
Yeah, it's not always bet on black. It's always bet on everything. That's the motto that wins you in Vegas. So maybe Jonathan Stewart gets a little bump here, especially when Cam Newton's not really running and seeming like himself. So I don't know. I don't really trust a whole lot of the Carolina Panthers here. Maybe Kelvin Benjamin a little bit here. Maybe Jonathan Stewart in a crunch. Any more thoughts on this game?
Beware of Greg Olsen, who might seem like a decent start this week, but the Saints have given up very few fantasy points to opposing tight ends this season. So even in the past 5 weeks, it's not like they've been trending up much. So just be careful with Olsen.
That's a good heads up. Let's talk about Pittsburgh at Cincinnati. This is sure to have huge implications in the AFC North race, where every team has a winning record, because I think they're playing the NFC South on the other side. My terrible Falcons.
Well, they didn't work out for them so much last week, I guess, but yeah. yeah.
But on the season as a whole.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Le'Veon Bell. He had an amazing game this past week. And how does he look against the Bengals here?
Well, the Bengals have a really generous defense when it comes to opposing running backs. But Ben Roethlisberger, I don't know, I didn't see exactly what the quote was, but he talked about worrying about overusing Le'Veon Bell. And just a few weeks ago, we were all worried that he was being underutilized, and then they said, "Oh, we're gonna pound the rock with him," and then he started scoring a lot of fantasy points. So it's a little bit worrisome, if good thing LeGarrette Blount isn't around, because then there might be a problem. But I don't think that there's a huge worry, but just he might not have as huge of a game as we might like.
Yeah, I think that's all talk, because what are they going to do? Pound Dree Archer up the middle? No.
Ben Roethlisberger is going to play running back.
Right, exactly. Le'Veon Bell's going to hand it to Ben, who's going to run up the middle.
They're going to run the Wildcat with Le'Veon Bell handing it off as Roethlisberger is the fly man. He's never mind. Just forget it. Just move on. Let's go to the next game.
This is why we are not head coaches. We are fantasy analysts. Yes. Let's talk about Giovanni Bernard versus Jeremy Hill. Because Hill and his coach sort of exchanged words a little bit in the media this past week, and now I'm wondering whether maybe Giovanni Bernard is the better play here, that Hill might see less action. You concerned about that?
Yeah, if you piss off the coach as a rookie, I'm assuming that's a bad thing for his fantasy purposes. So I like Giovanni Bernard. He's had a couple weeks to kind of get back into the swing of things after that long layoff with injury. He hasn't looked great, but he had 44 yards on the first 5 carries of the game last week, and then for some reason the Bengals decided to let Andy Dalton throw 3 interceptions. and almost throw the game away. So hopefully this week he'll bounce back and have an even bigger game.
Yeah, he really tried very hard to throw that game
Yes.
away against Tampa Bay. And speaking of those Buccaneers, they get to play Detroit this week, and it's one of the lowest Vegas point totals of the week. There's 5 games that are 42 points or less, and this is one of them. This is going to be kind of an ugly defensive battle. Are you starting any Tampa Bay player here? Or you just avoid all of them?
Maybe Mike Evans.
Yeah.
Obviously in redraft, I think you have to start him unless you have really, great options otherwise. But I'm not really looking forward to. He's got a low ceiling, I think.
Yeah, and you definitely don't want to start anybody in that run game. Don't be fooled by Doug Martin getting a touchdown last week.
Don't be fooled by Reggie Bush, something Bush, that he's healthy or something. I don't know.
Yeah, all he does is sort of eat away at the other running back's value. The Riddick gets,
Blah, blah,
disappears.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Joik Bell gets lowered a little bit. Detroit, I tweeted this out earlier. Detroit has allowed so few yards that there are 3 teams that have allowed triple the yardage on the ground in the past 5 weeks that Detroit has allowed. They've allowed, I think it was 272 yards in 5 games.
That's how many yards the Dolphins gave up last game. I think.
It's true. It's true. Detroit has given up, this less in 5 games than Miami gave up in 1 game. That is ridiculous. So, stay clear of Tampa Bay there. And then in Detroit, Calvin Johnson, Matt Stafford. This is kind of a straightforward game, I feel like.
I actually like the Detroit offense a little bit more than I think Vegas even does. But anyway.
Yeah, we could see a little more fireworks there. Tampa Bay's been a little bit better defensively the second half of the year than they were the first half, but that's not saying a ton. Let's talk about Fitzmagic, Houston, and they're at Jacksonville this week. Let's talk a little bit about the big game that they had.
The big
game. They're going to do this. They're going to do this every week, right? They're going to do this every week. 6 touchdowns. Giant DFS scores.
I mean, Ben Roethlisberger did it in consecutive weeks, so why not Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? I mean, it happens all the time.
But the Jacksonville pass defense is way better than their run defense. Their run defense is terrible. So I think this is a big Arian Foster game.
Yep.
Get Arian Foster in your DFS lineups. This is going to be a big game for him.
It's also another game that's slated to go under 42, over underrated.
Yeah.
So it's just a bad combination of things. Don't be sucked in by the Ryan Fitzmagic.
Yeah. Another great game here on the slate. St. Louis at Washington.
Awesome.
This is a good one.
St. Louis looks amazing. What are you talking about?
Yeah, they're going to score 50 points every week. We
We
should expect this to happen again against Washington.
It's funny we're joking about this, but this is kind of the weird part of the season where teams that are out of it are do crazy stuff, like score 52 points. Just pull out all the stops. We saw it from the Jets last week. They ran the ball like 500 times, but they were running all sorts of gadget plays or sweeps and catching the Dolphins off guard. And teams with nothing to lose, or teams that are desperate, are gonna do weird stuff that it's gonna affect fantasy in weird ways.
Yeah, and speaking of desperate, is Stedman Bailey worth picking up and starting as a flyer? He's had some decent weeks recently. He was the darling of the offseason and late last season, and he's finally starting to put it together here. Is he a guy you might consider?
Yeah, I like Stedman Bailey. I thought he was like I called him my pickup of the week after last week. He didn't get into the end zone. He had 100 yards. He had a touchdown the week before. He's playing about half the snaps, but it's about the same number as Tavon Austin. But he's picking things up. Yeah, he was suspended for the first 4 games of the season, but a lot of people liked him before the season, including me, before he got suspended. And I think that he's kind of picking up the slack where Brian Quick left off a while back when he got injured. So, yeah, he's worth a pickup. I don't know if he's worth necessarily starting over somebody you might have on your roster, but, if you needed a wide receiver, he's not a bad option.
Yeah, he's not a bad dart throw if you're looking at receivers outside the top 30, I'd say. On the other side of the ball for Washington, Deshaun Jackson is not looking good for this week. He hasn't been ruled out, but that's an injury to keep track of to make sure that, if you're thinking about using Jackson, he may not be available for you this week.
You mean Colt McCoy won't be able to just throw up a prayer and hope that Deshaun Jackson catches it for a touchdown? this week?
Yeah. He's going to have to throw 50 balls to Jordan Reed instead. and Niles Paul, too. He'll be like just all tight ends.
You know who? I talked about Greg Olsen and the Saints. The Rams have not given up very many fantasy points this year either. So be careful with Jordan Reed as well.
Ah, that's a good point. Maybe Andre Roberts would get in there and see some action.
Just stay away from the game.
I'm trying to create storylines here, but it's a very polarizing.
The Rams defense has been playing great. I mean, like it's not they had a horrible start to the season. They've been playing fantastic football on the defensive side. I mean, we saw like Aaron Donald, rookie in the middle. That defensive line is finally living up to what people expected, and I think that's going to cause problems for Colt McCoy this week.
Yeah. He's not going to get into the sort of shootout kind of yardage he had against Indy last week. That whole division is ridiculous on defense, I must say. If St. Louis, the way they're playing now, is the weak link defensively for the whole division, that's just I hate I'd hate to have a favorite team going against that division. They've been crazy this year. Let's talk about the Giants at Tennessee. This seems like a really great matchup for Rashad Jennings. Tennessee is one of those teams that allows a ton of rushing yards. He's dealing with an ankle injury, but it sounds like he's expected to play. So,
well, it did at the beginning of the week, and then he wasn't practicing today, so it's a little bit more iffy.
Yeah.
Let's
say if he's.
Go ahead.
If he's out, do you like Andre Williams?
Yes, I do actually. I like Andre Williams a lot if Rashad Jennings is out, and I haven't liked Andre Williams ever to this point. So, the Titans are giving up just a ton of fantasy points. They're bleeding fantasy points, and Williams it's a great matchup for Williams.
Yeah, and Mettenberger is trending towards playing maybe, but we might see Jake Locker here. Keep an eye on Mettenberger's injury. Although I don't think we care about anybody on Tennessee for fantasy purposes. Justin Hunter's no longer there. Nate Washington, you gonna start Nate Washington? It's just like.
Whatever. If I don't know how much. I didn't look at his prices, but if he's like a minimum salary guy. Maybe in a cheap GPP tournament, but yeah, not really looking forward to that offense.
Yeah. What about OBJ here? Is that a guy that maybe he had maybe a little bit of a more down?
He's a guy that you got to start every week. I mean, he didn't score a touchdown last week, but he caught 7 passes for 90 yards. It was good PPR output. He's a guy that is going to get a lot of targets. So I think he's one of those must-start kind of guys that, depending on price, obviously on DFS, but in redraft you can't bench him.
Yeah. And okay, here's the last of the 1 p.m. slate. This is the game that we mentioned earlier, and it's going to be a doozy. The Jets at Minnesota. Yay. So the Jets won't let Geno Smith pass, and they want everyone to run. Does the fact that they're running so much create any kind of fantasy value for their running attack? Johnson.
The Vikings are a lot better defensively against the run right now than the Dolphins are, so I don't know that necessarily is true. So I just don't start anybody in this game except maybe the Vikings defense. I think that they're a quality dart this week.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Jerick McKinnon might be back. McKinnon. And their kicker, the Jets kicker, Nick Folk, might have a hip flexor injury that could keep him out.
Well, that's his excuse for missing those 2 field goals last week.
Yep, he hurt his pride. That's all of the 1 p.m. games. Let's talk about the 4 p.m. games. We've got Buffalo at Denver. 2 teams with winning records and playoff aspirations here. Let's anything special for Denver here? Anything that is unique about this matchup where you wouldn't start one of these studs?
Why wouldn't I mean that just doesn't make any sense. You start all your Denver guys. I mean, they're not all gonna hit, but if you have them, except Wes Welker, who's never whatever. He's not even in our consciousness anymore. It's like he's been exorcised from the fantasy realm. But all the major guys, there's no reason not to start him.
Yeah, and it looks like Julius.
And of course, now Wes Welker is going to score 2 touchdowns. Now that I said that, but yeah, you don't start him.
You're jinxing all kinds of games. This is going to be the craziest week of football we've ever seen.
I'm going to make it a point to make a lineup with all the guys that I've bashed this week to see how it does.
I love it. That's the one that's going to win you the Millionaire Maker.
Yeah, right. I'm going to enter that one.
So Julius Thomas might be back. Keep an eye on his injury. And then Fred Jackson seems to be getting back into form after he's been back a couple of weeks from his injury. Does the game script play into whether you'll start him in this matchup or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't stay away from him in daily fantasy. I think that maybe he's a decent cash game guy just because he's probably going to get 20, 22 touches, and maybe he gets into the end zone. It's he's going to be the goal line guy for unless they really like Anthony Dixon there. But he's been getting all the work, so not a bad option.
Yeah, and I think they still use him in pass catching situations. He's a good pass catcher out of the backfield, so I expect him to get work regardless of whether they're.
It's not like the Bills would want to rest him. They're also in the playoff hunt, so they're going to want to do the best they can. And a lot of teams, the blueprint to beat the Broncos has been to run the ball and control the clock. So, they might really focus on Jackson.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Now, the Denver rush defense is pretty strong, but I think it's worth it because of the volume there. Another game we've got on our slate, Kansas City at Arizona. It's interesting. Like, these are two teams with winning records. They're supposed to be awesome, but I guess it's because their defenses.
Who said they're supposed to be awesome? I mean,
Well, the records might say that they're awesome.
Yeah. They've been playing some pretty bad football lately, so this is not going to be a fun game, I think.
The over/under is 40.5 points.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. I don't anticipate a lot of. I think it's going to be a great defensive matchup. But Drew Stanton looks awful. Alex Smith is Alex Smith, and he doesn't really have a lot of people to throw to. Although I will say I kind of like Travis Kelce in this game because the Cardinals have been awful against tight ends as they have been in recent years, apparently. Kelce might finally get. Everybody's always like, why aren't they throwing the ball to Kelce? Well, this week he might actually get. Yeah, of course now Anthony Fasano's going to score another touchdown because that's what happens. But Yeah,
I'm done with Kelce. Phenomenal talent, underutilized. They like to run the ball a lot. They're a defensive team. They're going to control the clock. I'm sort of done with Kelce.
It's like the genie
maybe next year.
Aladdin. Phenomenal cosmic powers. Bitty target count. Anyway.
Nice. You're sounding like
that's
me with your obscure references.
That's my terrible, awful tribute to Robin Williams. I'm sorry.
Right on. Yeah. That's one of his good ones. So Andre Ellington looks like he might be out of this game. Marion Grice might start in his place. This is only slightly interesting to me just because Kansas City is so terrible against the run. They're one of those three teams that have allowed triple the yardage that Detroit has offered up the past 5 games. So Marion Grice, maybe, but probably not. Larry Fitzgerald.
Andre Ellington's probably going to be out. So yeah, I actually think Stephon Taylor might be the guy to own there. But maybe both of them have decent run. I think both teams are going to try to run the ball and establish the run, and it's not going to be a fun game.
Yeah, most boring game ever. But Larry Fitzgerald will be back, so,
Good for him. Good for him. That's great.
Yep. I like Larry Fitzgerald. He's fun. Let's talk about San Francisco at Oakland. We're both living in the Bay Area. This is going to be a clash in Oakland, 4 o'clock on Sunday. I don't want to be anywhere near that stadium during this game. These teams hate each other. I kind of wonder if San Francisco hates Oakland more than their division rivals sometimes, how much I see these fans go after each other. Oakland has been decent against quarterbacks, and Kaepernick has been terrible.
It's been a pretty one-sided affair over the past 30 years. I'd have to say.
Yeah?
35 years.
History. Tell me a history lesson, Professor Miglio.
Well, I think the 49ers. Never mind. Let's just go back to the game. We're running out low on time now. Let's move on. But no, I like that. I actually don't like this game from a fantasy perspective, except for Frank Gore. The Raiders allowed roughly 7 million points to the St. Louis Rams last week, 3 million of which went to Trey Mason. So I think that it's a great game for Gore, and he's really not expensive on DFS, so he's one of my favorite plays this week.
Yeah, I could see that happening. I could also see him doing 18 carries for 30 yards or something crazy like that.
No, come on. It's the Raiders. It's the Raiders.
Yeah. Oh, but they're at home.
Yeah, they're at home.
Let's just move on. Seattle at Philadelphia. This should be a good game. I'm excited for this one. Sorry to be so negative this week. Seattle at Philadelphia. The Seahawks' defense is a little worse on the road. The over-under on this, though, is 48.5, so we should see some action here. I like Russell Wilson this week. I think you do too. Tell me why.
The Philly pass defense has given up just a ton of fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. And, Wilson is probably going to score some points with his legs. I just like him a lot this week. I think it's going to be probably something like, along the lines of a 28-24 game. And Wilson's going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think this is the chance where you sit Sanchez. He's got better matchups down the line, but I don't like him playing in this matchup, even at home.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like Sanchez has been playing well, but he's made some mistakes, but he's been still been okay. But it's a ticking time bomb. When is he gonna blow up in a bad way? So we'll see.
This week.
Yeah, there you go.
If it's going to happen, it's right here.
Yes, this is the game to prove himself, really.
Yeah, exactly. It is a big proving ground for him, for sure. I don't think it's going to go so well for him, but maybe he'll surprise me. So now we've got 2 games left. These are the sort of high Vegas odds games, the fantasy yumminess of the week, if you will. We've got Sunday Night Football, New England at San Diego. And do you have any concerns about New England traveling west to San Diego?
I mean, usually I think it's the teams that travel from west to east that have issues. But yeah, it's a pretty far, game to, traveling all the way from New England all the way down to San Diego could affect them. Their circadian rhythms could be off. No, just kidding.
Whoa.
Yes.
Check out the brains on Brett.
It's weird. I have this, it's just a weird feeling that this game is going to be low scoring for some reason. I don't know what it is. I have zero evidence to back that up, but I just have this feeling that it's going to be something like 17-14, or maybe not that low, maybe 21-17, and it's going to be like 2 Brandon Bolden touchdowns and a Ladarius Green touchdown, and we're all going to be like, what is going on?
I just changed all of my daily fantasy lineups to include all the players from both of these teams because you just jinxed it and made it a 100-point game.
Yes, it's good. 60-55 in the end.
Yep, I just stacked them all, stacked both teams, just all the way through my DFS lineups. Just that. Thank you. That was nice.
Yes.
I would say, New England running backs. Alex warned you. Ignore them.
Yes.
Like it's just a mess.
Yes. There's no need to talk about this. I told you so.
Yeah. What about Keenan Allen, though, here? I feel like New England has been crafty with covering top receivers. It kind of, yields some different fantasy points from players. Like we saw Devontae Adams have a big game last week because of the way New England sort of schemed for Randall Cobb and Jordy Nelson against Green Bay last week. Well, how do you think this shakes out for Keenan Allen? And is there someone else who maybe steps up if they're game planning for Allen?
I think it's probably a lot easier for New England this week. Keenan Allen is great. The Chargers don't have nearly the weapons that the Packers do, and Aaron Rodgers is playing like at a superhuman level right now. And Phillip Rivers isn't. So, I do think that they're going to stick Darrelle Revis on Keenan Allen, and he's probably going to have a down game. Maybe Eddie Royal steps up. Maybe Antonio Gates has another nice game. He had a nice game last week. He just didn't score a touchdown. If Darrelle Revis really clamps down on Allen, then it's maybe he'll have 4 catches for 50 yards or something like that.
Yeah, I could see one of the. I'm pretty confident that one of those 2 guys will have a big game, and I'm not sure which it will be, either Gates or Eddie Royal. I'm going to say Royal is going to have a big game here, just because. Yeah, I feel like he hasn't had a big game in a while, but I don't
score last week.
Down. Yeah, but I like early in the season, it felt like he was getting a couple touchdowns every game, but I guess that's his MO. So
yeah, right. Yeah, no, this is exactly how every Eddie Royal season has gone. It's just and we liked him, and we were. I was bamboozled again. He had the 4 touchdowns in the first 4 weeks, and then he disappeared. Anyway,
he's such a tease. All right, let's move on to the last game so we can get to our DFS picks. The last game is Green Bay at Atlanta. Basically, this is the highest point total game. Start everybody. Do you think Devontae Adams is a guy that is going to have another decent game, or is he going to kind of go back to irrelevance just because the game plan last week sort of pushed the ball towards him?
No, I think he's going to be fine. I think that he showed that he could be trusted, except for that stupid that touchdown that he had last week. The easy touchdown. But the Aaron Rodgers really trusted him last week. He showed it, and Adams delivered for the most part. And I think that that's going to be big going forward. He's kind of in that James Jones role now.
Yeah, that's fair. And Roddy White, last week's game with an ankle sprain, his status for Week 14 is uncertain. Keep an eye on it. Maybe Harry Douglas is a guy you could throw into your lineup if White misses again. But this is tricky. Hopefully, we'll get more information, in time. But on Monday Night Football, it's hard to trust these guys, with the late start here. So there's not a whole lot you're going to be able to do with a late swap there with Harry Douglas, except for maybe in DFS, but not in a traditional lineup, I wouldn't think. Okay, so if you want to see our rankings and kind of get more details about the players we've talked about today, you can go to the9route.com. That has everything to do with our podcast. It has our rankings, which we update until the last minute on Sunday mornings, and it has new widgets for daily fantasy sports values. This is for FanDuel as well as for DraftKings, and it's sort of automated based on our rankings. So if you want to get some ideas of guys who might be decently priced, go check that out over at the9route.com. So, speaking of DFS, let's dive into our DraftKings picks. Alex, tell me about your stack of the week.
This week is an odd one. I don't like a lot of stacks over DraftKings this week. I just have one. I like Drew Brees. This is probably a cash game thing, and if you stack in cash games, Drew Brees and Kenny Stills. Kenny Stills has kind of been a favorite target for Brees ever since Brandon Cooks went out. He had a huge game last week. He could have another big game this week against Carolina, and it's not a terribly expensive one. I mean, all things considered, it is Drew Brees, who seems to have his mojo back. So it's all in all, it's a total of 15,100, and it's not too bad.
Yeah, I like Drew Brees as a cash game play, and I think Stills at 6,000 is a decent play in both cash or GPP formats. I'm going out on a limb here, and I know you're not going to like this, but if I'm stacking an attorney and Vontae Davis is out, I'm going Hoyer and Josh Gordon.
It's actually a good GPP. It's actually a really good GPP stack, yes.
High risk. I'll give you. This is not for the faint of heart, not cash game action, but it's only 13-3, and so I might go with that stack if Davis is out. What about QBs non-stacked? I like Tom Brady as a safe cash game play here in a high-point game. He's only 8,500 at San Diego there in DraftKings. Who's a guy you like?
Well, we talked about Russell Wilson. He's, I think, also a safe cash game guy who, has pretty decent GPP upside as well. He's only 7,700, which is on the cheaper side for a guy I think is going to have a top 5 game. And then Teddy Bridgewater, cheap GPP option against the Jets, who did shut down Ryan Tannehill last week. But that was kind of like the Jets' final gasp. I think that was like their Super Bowl, part 2. They play their Super Bowl against the Patriots and then the Dolphins, and that let down. I think it could be actually a pretty decent day for Minnesota. But that's I don't love it. I just think it's a good price, and Bridgewater might have a big game.
I'll tell you what.
Stop making fun of me.
I don't love it either. I don't love it either. I like the Russell Wilson pick though a lot. I think it's 7,700. That's a good one. Bridgewater, not so much.
I'm very good at this podcast in like completely convincing myself not to do something halfway through. Like, wait a minute, no, what am I talking about?
It's like you're supposed to run off that ramp with the hang glider so that you can like get enough, lift as you drop off the cliff, and then as you're running off that ramp, you're like, no, and you just kind of go sliding off.
And then you're flying, and it turns out there's a Teddy Bridgewater is your parasol, and you die. Anyway, so let's go over to running back.
Oh man, yeah. Hey, let's talk about running backs. I basically my theme for receivers and running backs this week is pay attention to the guys that are ahead of players on the depth chart who are injured and don't end up playing, and this is going to require some sort of last-minute swapping. Hopefully, no servers go down at DFS headquarters this week. But I like guys like Andre Williams, who we mentioned before, if Rashad Jennings is out, Terrence West, if Crowell is out, Grice, if Ellington is out. I think that one is likely to happen. And then, aside from that theme, Ryan Matthews is pretty cheap against New England at 4,700. I think he's a decent play this week. Who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, if Rashad Jennings plays, I like him a lot, and we'll find out more this week. And you're right. If it's Andre Williams, definitely play Andre Williams at 4,400. I think that's a great deal. Justin Forsett, a great cash game guy, and he's only 6,900. I think. So I mean, that's for a guy who's probably going to get into 20 points fantasy wise. I think that's a good deal. And then Frank Gore, we talked about him. He's only 4,800, and the Raiders are pretty bad against the run.
Yeah, I think at 4,800, I might even be willing to take a chance on him. At receiver, kind of the same theme for me. Just kind of looking to see, players that might be injured ahead of these guys. So Steve Smith, if Torrey Smith is out, there's a couple other guys. Andre Roberts, if Deshaun Jackson is out. Roberts is only 3,200. At that cheap, I might even consider him if you're looking for a really cheap guy. And then I just like a few guys in the 6,000 range that sort of seem decently priced, like Kenny Stills, DeAndre Hopkins, Brandon LaFell, Kelvin Benjamin, maybe even in the 6,000s there. So I like those 6,000.
Just like every receiver, just keep talking.
I like them. Yeah. I like Jerry Rice. I like Warren. Yes.
Warren who? Oh, Warren who? What? Who?
Warren Moon is going to be my stack. I'm playing old school. Warren Moon and Jerry Rice
in that
have teamed up, and they're on my imaginary stack.
Man, Warren Moon to Jerry Rice, that would have been if anyway. I like Mike Wallace this week. Again, every week I feel like I like Mike Wallace and he lets me down. So I don't know, but this week it's another good matchup against Baltimore. And, Wallace had if he had just caught that stupid touchdown pass last week that he tried one-handed, it would have been a great game for him. But I think that this week is another chance for him to have a big game.
It wasn't Ryan Tannehill's fault for a change.
Yes, it was a great pass.
Wallace actually just missed it. Yeah,
it was a great pass.
So frustrating.
Randall Cobb, he's my favorite cash game receiver, I think, this week. He's only 7,400, and I feel like he's going to go nuts against the Falcons this week. So, I think that's a pretty good price. And then Marcus Colston, we talked about Stills. He's 6,000. Colston's only 4,500, and I think that, the Panthers aren't very good on pass defense, so I think that Colston's kind of a cheaper option that might get some play this week.
Yeah, and then at tight end, Jimmy Graham, because of his terrible game, is only 6,500. I feel like this may be the lowest he is the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I may put him in all my lineups. He's not going to get 0 targets again, so I think he's going to be very highly owned this week. Who do you got at tight end?
I really like, actually, Jared Cook, who also put up a goose egg last week, but, it's a good matchup against Washington this week. And I think that for 3,000, he's a minimum price guy. A guy if you want to fill your roster with more expensive options, obviously just a GPP play, but he could get 6 or 7 targets and have a nice day.
Nice.
And Antonio Gates.
Antonio Gates at 4,700. Yeah. I think that's a decent play too. I've also got Delaney Walker at 4,200 on my radar, and Dwayne Allen coming back from injury was only 3,600. It's a little gamble to play a guy coming off injury, but at 3,600, it's kind of hard to ignore. At defense, I've got one high pick and one low pick. If you're going to go cheap, I'd say Denver versus Buffalo is only 2,700. If you're going to go in the higher range, I'd say San Francisco at Oakland. It's 3,600. They're one of the most expensive ones, but of the good picks,
weird this week. There's all the good options are expensive, so it's kind of I like your Denver option. It's kind of like the best value, I think.
Yeah. I like that too. I'm probably not going to be going all the way to the top unless I just can't fill out the money in my roster, but I like San Francisco the best out of those top ones. All right, let's move on to FanDuel. Tell me about your stack of the week at FanDuel.
Again, it's not a great stack week even on FanDuel, but one that I found that I liked, Matt Stafford, he's only 8,300, and Golden Tate at 7,800. At FanDuel, those prices are not bad, combining for only 16,000. And I think that Golden Tate's going to continue to get a lot of targets, and if he scores, he's going to be he's going to have a big game. He almost scored last week, and he had and could have had a big game then. So it's not a bad stack.
Yeah, I've been surprised at how much Golden Tate has done with Calvin Johnson.
He's over 1,000 yards already receiving. So
yeah, I don't think they've had a 1,000-yard receiver since Calvin Johnson came to the team. Like aside from Calvin Johnson.
Okay, yeah, aside from Calvin Johnson.
Right. But like, you know what I'm saying? You know
that
what
guy,
I mean?
that guy, whatever.
Yeah, mega something. And then you made fun of me a little bit for Fitzmagic here, but I see on your list as another quarterback.
No, forget it. I made that. I've. No, I'm just kidding. He's only 17. Yeah, he's only 7,200. There's not a lot of value at draft duel fan kings. FanDuel. I'm sure they loved me for saying that. But no, I mean, Fitzpatrick is not a bad kind of GPP dart at that point.
Yeah, here's the mistake you made. You assume that there's someone listening to the podcast.
Yes.
That they would be angry with you for butchering their name. But I don't know. I think,
well, they were about to.
Listening.
Some big guy over at FanDuel was gonna, offer us a huge something. And if you're listening, anyway. Not anymore.
No, you blew it. You blew our big chance, but that's all right. Because with these picks, we're gonna win $1 million.
Yeah.
Tell me about your running backs. You got Frank Gore on here again.
Yeah, I like Frank Gore.
Tell me about another running back.
Yeah, Bishop Sankey. He's only 5,400. Totally not sexy pick, but he's only 5,400. So, and he's going up against the Giants who aren't that good. They've been decent, but not good. So, yeah, Bishop Sankey. Bishop. I'm getting a little punchy. I'm sorry, everybody out there, all two listeners.
No, it's good. Roll with it. Fuel off the slap happiness. I like you've got Randall Cobb on your list here too. I like that one as well. And Marquise Lee, I think, is an interesting one. He's sort of come on for the Jags as a wide receiver for them. Kind of changes from week to week a bit, but Lee, I think, is an interesting tourney play here. What do you like here?
He's only 5,700, and the Texans have generally been giving up a ton of fantasy points to receivers this year. So, not a bad. And it seems like he's kind of like the latest flavor for the Jaguars, the latest rookie flavor this year. So, I mean, he and Cecil Shorts, I think, are the same price. So both of them, I think, are pretty decent. But Lee's kind of, I think, more upside.
Yeah, I think Lee has more upside. I think that's a great point. And then I see your boyfriend. You got a man crush on Kelsey again here at FanDuel.
I didn't pick him over at DraftKings, okay? So, but he's only 5,300. He's almost a minimum salary guy here at FanDuel, and I think that price is too good.
Yeah, I think at minimum price that is way too good to pass up on, especially if you're going to put him in attorney. He's a little bit risky, but I like it at that price. Tell me about your defense at FanDuel. And and there's no kicker on your list. Oh my goodness.
No kicker. Dan Carpenter. No, wait, he's not playing the
Just
Dolphins.
always go Dan Carpenter.
That's just my default, Dan Carpenter. Minnesota. I like this. They're much cheaper than they are at DraftKings. So relatively speaking, they're only 5,000. So against the Jets, I think that's a pretty good play there.
Yeah, I think that's great.
And
especially
that's
if Smith
pretty cheap considering that.
passes.
Yeah, well, considering that they had a huge week last week, and they're playing the Jets, it's kind of crazy that they're so cheap. But yeah, whatever.
No, I like that pick a lot. All right, that brings us to the end of our show. My mic didn't explode. That's amazing. I love it. And
you jinxed it. No, I'm just kidding. Keep going.
Crap. Tell me, what can people look for that you've written or put out into the interwebs this week that they should check out?
If you're into NFL awards, I've been keeping track, for the past few weeks of who I think is going to win the awards, top 5 at all the major awards. Aaron Rodgers is the MVP. I'm sorry, J.J. Watt, if you're listening, because I know you are. I think
he's going to kill you.
Yes, he's going to come over.
He's going to stare right into your soul, and he's going to stare right into your soul, and your head's just going to explode.
But he's currently traveling via electrical wire to my computer. So, but no, I think anyway, you can find that on Bleacher Report, and I'll have a daily musings out this week for football guys, where I talk about some of the stuff we've talked about tonight and some other draft plays and fades from DraftKings and FanDuel.
I love it. And you can check out my weekly normalized strength of schedule tool over at Football Guys. It was posted today. Go check that out to sort of find future gems and look for defensive matchups you might be able to take advantage of during your fantasy playoffs. Go check it out. I'd love to hear what you think about it. And go subscribe to Football Guys. So that's all we have for our show tonight. Thank you, Alex Miglio, as always. Go check out the9route.com where you can find all of the fantasy goodness about the podcast. If you want to chat with us on Twitter, please do. We love to chat. Alex is at Alex Miglio. I am at Austin NFL. Until next time, may your players stay healthy, may your sleepers wake up, and your Monday nights be filled with miraculous comebacks. Good night.